you're one of our haters who are out there watching.
I want to warn people about hypnoporn.
We need to stay meta.
Stop that.
Need new tires? Like what?
If Jim would shut up for a second.
Oh, high fidelity.
Okay, don't tell me to shut up.
I'm not whining.
I eat doggies. I eat doggies. Feels like a party.
Stop that.
It's a war. They have made it so that I cannot be celebrating July 4th.
I don't care. I'm gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend. I don't care. How do I think? That's what I think. I don't care.
This is 6 Degrees of Stew. You don't need to stay meta, but I'm glad you're here. And Lev Parnas was in there, and Dr. Stephen Hassan was in there. Perhaps it was Lev and Stephen Hassan was in there for some reason, but the three of them were all together in there. And Dr. Hassan was primarily speaking. And there was a person who came up and generally just really, really distraught about things going on in their life and mental health. And just my heart poured out. My heart was breaking hearing their stories and things they were telling. And Dr. Stephen Hassan's like, well, if you visit freedomofmind.com. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is so painful to hear him say this. And I understand he's a public figure and he probably gets this a lot, and you have to set boundaries. But this was one person that came up to speak and, people control their spaces. And Lev Parnas, whatever you may think about him, and I have I have big thoughts on Lev Parnas and his grift. But he actually took time and spoke to the gentleman more than Dr. Stephen Hassan did and told the guy to DM him, asked what state he lived in, and said he would try to help him as much as he could and to get some resources and that they would communicate after the space. So that was even more confirming to me that Stephen has lost his altruistic nature and has gone for this for-profit grift. I did go back to get the Twitter space because I have Spaces dashboard that I subscribe and pay for monthly, but unfortunately the Twitter user that hosted that space has deactivated their Twitter account, so it's no longer available to include here.
And so many parallels, but just to circle back to the BITE model, the I is information. It sounds like the Mooney religion had withheld really important information from you and deceived you with information.
Absolutely.
And then worked really hard to prevent you from learning the things that then would allow for the T in the BITE model, the thoughts that maybe the church wasn't what it claimed to be. Is that
so?
A fair summary?
But I would add there are other things in the I, like extensive propagandizing and not having access to TV or newspapers or any other sources of information. Having people spy on each other and report if they see anybody violating any rules, is very important. Any information you would tell them would be used to manipulate you if you got out of line or any type of problem. Just extensive indoctrination, like hours and hours of Moon's speeches or listening to lectures or reading doctrines, etc. People were always kept busy. There was no vacation time. Oh, you can take a couple of weeks off, like didn't exist. And there was always this urgency. Oh, and the other thing is they would always make a goal and then up it. So this, and Lifton later talked about demand for purity. The idea is we want you to bring 3 people a week to the introductory lecture. So I'd bring 3 people. And it's like, well, bring 5, bring 7, bring 10. And I had recruited 13 direct disciples. They called them spiritual children. Who and at the point that I got my first spiritual children, that was another moment of my indoctrination where I was told, you don't want to show any doubts at all because you're a parent now, and you don't want to harm your spiritual child and interfere with their faith journey.
And this
so
is what
therefore,
I talked about.
That was another level of an.
Steph and I, Steph Kremer, very good friend of mine. You should follow her. It's at Steph in Doubt on Twitter, Blue Sky. I believe she has the same handle. She's amazing, but follow her. We had a Twitch space, and we were watching Pam Hemphill's interview that she did on Dark Outpost. And it was during the time that she said she was reformed and she was going on CNN, this ex-MAGA granny. And, I left all that, and she was on this conspiracy QAnon show at the same time saying her mom was a mass serial killer and the satanic panic kind of stuff. And it's really an odd interview. And this is where it's kind of a parallel to Dr. Stephen Hassan. Like, if being in the cult was enough, they recruited him. He had some very traumatic experiences in it. Like, you can stay within that. What really happened to you? You don't need to sensationalize it or make it bigger than the stories. Because I also in my research read other books of people that were in the Moonies and had higher up positions, and you can find their pictures, their names. They're all over Moon research that I found. And the only thing you find from Dr. Stephen Hassan of them is basically they got annoyed with him with the ex-Moon Inc. stuff, and that whole thing when it went on, and they kind of ignore him now. They don't really care. But that in itself is enough. And it was the same with Pam. It's enough that I feel like she was abused, and she probably had a very horrible child life and trauma. You don't need to embellish it with these stories. What you experience is enough. And maybe that's some other kind of pathology, which I do believe it is, having been a mental health counselor, and I still keep up on the research, and even though I'm not in the, actively practicing anymore. But yeah, your story is enough to tell. You don't need to embellish or add to it. Just be authentic.
In involvement. And indeed, later when I studied psychology, it's a very powerful, recruiting other people into the cult is a very powerful reinforcer into your cult identity and
Absolutely.
Your involvement.
We say in Mormonism these days, the Mormon missionary program is far more for the missionaries than it is to bring converts to the church.
Interesting.
Samantha, any parallels that are striking with you just over the past 5-10 minutes?
I was just thinking about how on Mormon missions, I think a lot of people have this mindset of if they wake up 2 minutes late past the fixed time you're supposed to wake up, then maybe that will prevent someone's soul from being saved that day. Or there is that idea that if you don't rigidly adhere to these arbitrary rules, then you might put someone else's salvation in jeopardy, and that definitely keeps people.
Absolutely. So I want to say, even with fundraisers where you're asking someone to give $2 for a 15-cent piece of chocolate, it is believed that you're giving them a ticket to heaven because you're getting them to do a good deed that connects you to the Messiah.
Yeah.
And there was even a movie called Ticket to Heaven. But that was the notion. And yeah, it was not only recruiting that person, but all their ancestors were like starving in low levels of the spirit world. So I took it very seriously, and I did it to others what was done to me. I lied, I manipulated, because the ends justify the means.
You consciously lied?
My Moonie identity, this is the mentality. Satan deceived Adam and Eve away from God. So God needs to deceive Satan's children away from Satan to God. That is the explicit teaching.
Yeah, and we call it lying for the Lord.
Yeah. Heavenly deception was the term. That was the Moonies term. The Christians call it transcendental trickery. And on it goes.
So you have this big car crash. Well, let me just say this. 2 quick things, and then I want to go to your leaving the Moonies. I think about Malcolm X, and when he discovered for the first time that Elijah Muhammad had a mistress and had babies with his mistress kind of thing. Did you ever learn anything about Mr. Moon that was like either through books you read or things you heard about his sexual history or whatever, that while you were a Moonie made you wonder whether he was actually fallen or corrupt as a leader? Or did you ever just observe?
I never had
bad
conscious
behavior?
doubts. I
Okay.
suppressed them. I did thought stopping. Moonies are trained to do chants to themselves, like crush Satan, glory to heaven, peace on earth, glory to heaven, peace on earth, true parents, true parents. So you were taught these thought stopping techniques, which is a behavior modification technique to stay pure. There was one episode where a member asked me, is it true that father was married before? True mother?
Because you hadn't been taught that he had been married before.
Not at all.
So that was withheld, that information was withheld from you, his previous marriage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
He was the sinless, most pure, most perfect human being ever on earth. Ever. Better than Jesus, because Jesus failed, because he should have been married and had perfect children and sinless children. But so I remember asking my leader, Kamiyama, about, was father married before? And he said, yes, but it's not good to tell members that. That was one of the few moments where he intentionally said, lie to the members, don't reveal this.
Yeah, and you probably know this because I think I talked about it in your interview with me, but I was 31 before I ever read anything specifically about Joseph Smith's 30 plus wives.
Yeah.
Like in all my time as a Mormon, any additional wife of Joseph Smith's was literally never mentioned in church ever.
Yep.
And if you talked about it, you would have been punished.
Yep.
That's
a parallelism.
Okay. All right.
Technique to stay pure. There was one episode where a member asked me, is it true that father was married before? True mother?
Because you hadn't been taught that he had been married before.
Not at all.
So that was withheld, that information was withheld from you, his previous marriage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
He was the sinless, most pure, most perfect human being ever on earth. Ever. Better than Jesus, because Jesus failed, because he should have been married and had perfect children and sinless children. But so I remember asking my leader, Kamiyama, about, was father married before? And he said, yes, but it's not good to tell members that. That was one of the few moments where he intentionally said, lie to the members, don't reveal this.
Yeah, and you probably know this because I think I talked about it in your interview with me, but I was 31 before I ever read anything specifically about Joseph Smith's 30 plus wives.
Yeah.
Like in all my time as a Mormon, any additional wife of Joseph Smith's was literally never mentioned in church ever.
Yep.
And if you talked about it, you would have been punished.
Yep. That's a parallelism.
Okay. All right. So how in the world did you lose your faith and extricate yourself? You said you got to the point where you literally would have killed for Mr. Moon?
I was a security guard on a few occasions, and it would have been an honor
Even a
to
security guard,
jump in front of him and take a bullet, or take a gun and shoot somebody who is trying to harm father or mother or whatever.
So you'd have died or killed for him.
But I even early on, I was told, we'll send Americans to the front lines of Korea if North Korea invades in order to get America in a land war. And I was like, fine with that. Whatever God wants. Whatever God wants, I surrender.
Wow.
Tell me what to do, God.
Wow.
And I prayed 2 to 3 hours a day, I should add also. And they were not normal prayers. I came to realize this much, much later. They were prayers more like telling God things, like declaring things, as opposed to humbly asking for things or please guide me. I need to share another story that led to my promotion to the national headquarters. And this falls under the maybe category of spiritual experiences, but keep in mind I was like sleep deprived, and so the mind does a lot of funny things.
Oh, this is a
And I
whopper.
also
This is a
did
good one.
2 7-day fasts and I think
He
4
tells this one a lot,
3-day
too.
fasts.
7-day fast.
Well,
Only
not a lot,
water and worked full
but
days.
a lot if you've
Oh my
watched
gosh.
as much
Yeah.
material as I have.
But I had this recurring dream where I was in a room. It was similar to the rooms that I would meet with Moon in the mansion, but I was brought to the head of the table where Moon was seated and the other leaders were around the table, and Moon hands me a cleaver and says, "I want you to chop off your finger." And in my dream, I put my pinky down and I chop off my finger, and the blood spurting in my dream everywhere. And they give me a white gauze that instantly becomes red. And Moon is beaming, so happy and so proud of me. And I had this dream 3 nights in a row, and I reported it to a Japanese woman leader. And Moon said I was tested in the spirit world, and I passed. And that's when I was told I was going to be the able to Neil Salone and the President of America.
And what do you make of all that now?
Again, after the fact, trying to listen to other people who've left and piece things together, I was remembering that we had been told about the Yakuza, which are the Japanese mafia gangsters with tattoos, and they often have to chop off a finger to show loyalty to their gangster mob boss. So I think that may have been the origin of where I got that idea from. But it fit the model of Steve as the model American member that everyone needed to follow. So that was a relevant thing. I want to tell one other.
Well, really quickly,
Okay.
Steve, thank you. I'm going to just give a quick shout out. Going Bananas just gave a $10 super chat. If you guys don't mind, we have a lot of live listeners right now. Please just take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Like and subscribe.
While you're at it, subscribe to Zelf on the Shelf. That's Samantha's YouTube channel as well. But those subscriptions really help. And I just want to thank Going Bananas for the super chat. They just made a $10 donation. You know, we flew Steve out. We're paying for his stay along with the workshop that we're doing. But we fronted the money, and, you know, your donations help allow us to do things like have Samantha here as a co-host, have me.
I may seem like my size and my face are like really against anybody making money for the work that they do on the side, or if that's, you know, something that you do. I subscribe to so many great Substacks and Patreons and podcasts and independent people who do this work, but they're not feeding me misinformation. They do their research, and they do deserve to be compensated for that. If people want to pay for this, you know what, go ahead. But it's so typical of these for-profit grifters when they find this niche. And, you know, super chats right there. That's a whole nother space that we could probably do. And again, I think people deserve to be paid for what they're doing, especially if in your free time, you know, this is something you really like to do. But I just think you should put that towards really good independent work that is fact-checked. They are doing real work, and they're not spreading more half-truths, disinformation, misinformation, and there's, you know, things of that nature behind them. It's exhausting.
Be here and have Steve come. So if any of you do want to support us financially, whether it's through super chats on YouTube or through the donation button, please do so. And while you're at it, support Zelf on the Shelf and their Patreon. Thank you, Going Bananas. He writes, "Thank you, Steve, for making this episode happen. I'm in shock at how many parallels there have been so far. Mormon Stories has been so helpful in my faith crisis this past year. Thank you. And I don't think that, Going Bananas is the only person who's finding so much value in hearing your story to help them process their own. Did you want to add anything, Samantha?
No.
Okay.
But your story was also helpful to me when I was leaving Mormonism.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Yeah. Okay.
So how did I get out of the cult? Well, after this,
without a Stephen Hassan,
with this near fatal van crash and a very severely broken leg and physical trauma to my body, I was in a hospital away from the cult, sleeping all day long and eating, and no contact with the group. My team came to visit me for half an hour once, and they were reassigned to somebody else, and they gave me a little cassette recorder with one of Moon's speeches on it. But other than that, there was no reinforcement for the cult mindset. And I did a kind of a violation of the instructions that I was under. I called my sister Thea. I reached out to the one person in my previous life who hadn't said, "You're in a cult, you're brainwashed, how can you believe this, you're so smart." She just was like, "I miss you and I don't understand and I want you in my life." So when the opportunity came, I broke the rules, called her. That led to a deprogramming.
You get out. How did you get out? How did you figure out that it was all bad?
I was rescued by my family, essentially. They didn't know where I was for a year. I drove into the back of a tractor-trailer truck on the Baltimore Beltway at 80 miles an hour and basically nearly died, broke my leg really badly.
Did you fall asleep behind the wheel or something?
Fell asleep, 3 days, no sleep, and 2 weeks in the hospital, sleeping, eating away from the group, who I was very close with growing up. She's 3 years older than me. And she said, "I'm so happy to hear your voice, and how are you?" And I'm like, "I'm in a..."
We'll get to this in when we look at part 2 of this series, but his sister Thea, he gives her a shout out at the beginning of, I believe it's his first book, for helping him write, it's either the first or the second, for helping write the strategic, the SIA approach. And he quotes it as his own all the time, and we'll talk about the SIA approach, but she was integral part of that, and she has no area of expertise to be that, to have developed it, and people are following that. And I don't think they realize that Dr. Stephen Hassan's sister was integral in developing the SIA approach, which is part of his model today, BITE model, the influence continuum. It's all still on his website, SIA. But I will talk about that. I just want to mention that every time you hear Thea, remember that she is involved in these sheets that they show, when the BITE model comes up, when he talks about the influence continuum, when he talks about his SIA. Why can't I think of what that stands for right now? 1 second here. Let me look up. I think it's strategic This is what happens when you read all of his stuff so much. And it's because he uses the acronyms, and I do too. It's strategic interactive approach. Yes, that's what it is. Strategic interactive approach. And just looking at it right now, he says, he's the creator. He doesn't mention Thea. I just happened to catch it because he gives her a shout out in an intro to his book.
Hospital, what happens? And I fell asleep at the wheel of a van, and I broke my leg and hurt myself. Oh my God, I want to help you. When can you come home? And I'm like, I need surgery, and I don't know if I can come and visit you because Mom and Dad are satanic. And my oldest sister Steffi also had said that I was in a cult and I was brainwashed. My sister Thea never did. So she was just like, I miss you and I don't understand.
So she was the safest person you felt you could contact.
Absolutely.
Huge lesson. Be safe if you want to have a relationship or even have influence
This is true.
on believing
I agree
family
with this.
and
Be
friends.
that safe person they can
Be
still
She
talk
was
to.
unconditionally loving, and that's what the ethical side of the influence
Not everybody can
continuum
do
is. You
this,
love
though. It's
someone
very hard.
for their beingness, not because they're
Don't beat
doing
yourself
what you
up if you
want them
can't.
to do or behaving or believing what you want them
Self-care
to
first before you can
believe.
help anybody
Can I
else.
ask a very quick question?
Sure.
Were the Moonies paying for your surgery and healthcare?
The van was insured, and they got the cheapest, most pathetic medical help, and they would routinely send people to clinics even though they had billions of dollars because they didn't want to spend God's money on members' health care. And if people got really sick, they asked them to leave and become associate members and wouldn't take responsibility, even though when they joined they turned over everything to them financially. That's another egregious part of their policy. But my sister said, "You have a nephew. I want him to know his Uncle Stevie." I'll never forget it because as a kid I was called Stevie. My sister Thea, who was the only person in my previous life that didn't say I was in a cult or brainwashed. She was always just like, "I love you and I don't understand. This doesn't seem like you, Steve." I reached out to her, not because I wanted to leave, but because I missed her. And she was like, "You have two nephews. I want them to know their Uncle Steve. Come and visit." And I'm like, "If you promise not to tell the parents, I can arrange it because I'm a leader." And she promised. And fortunately, she broke her promise. And she told my parents, and they hired some. But that was like the real me, Stevie, right? And I said to her, "I think I can arrange a visit, but you have to promise not to tell Mom and Dad or Steph that I would come, and I think I can arrange it."
So you were taught that non-members were inferior and or evil.
Of course.
Yeah.
1,000%. We were the chosen, and not the way you were asking about Judaism, thinking that Jews are chosen people. The Moonies, we were the elite of God, period, in human history.
And I mean, is that a soft parallel, Samantha, or a hard parallel for Mormons? You think?
The superiority
We
complex?
don't think non-Mormons are evil, right?
I mean, anything ranging from just ignorant and under the influence of Satan without realizing it to full-blown evil.
Or definitely spiritually inferior.
Yeah.
You would
I don't
never
know anything about
say that
Samantha's
as a
story,
Mormon.
by the way.
But
No,
you kind of...
and it even comes into other things. Non-Mormon marriages aren't forever. They're just, second-rate marriages, things like that.
But be aware of anyone who's not a believing faithful member, and especially apostates.
Especially anyone who has any pushback on anything you believe, or
stay away.
Were you explicitly forbidden for having contact with any of your family members?
They told me to not tell them where I was because they had used this story that they were out to kidnap me and beat me and torture me to lose my faith.
Because you had mentioned that you called your dad about the Nixon thing. Was that allowed? Was there some amount of contact?
That was much earlier in my involvement, and I didn't have a cell phone, but I was encouraged to proselytize.
Got it.
And the idea is to try to bring everyone in and get them to donate money, and there were a few parents who were willing to say that they support their loved one's choice of a new religious movement or group or something like that. So my sister said she promised. I talked to my leader and I said, once my surgery's over, I'm not going to be able to be fundraising or lecturing. I had a cast on from my toes to my groin at the time, and the other leg was bandaged, and my chest, I guess, had been compressed against the steering wheel. I said, I really feel guilty if a family member needs to say and take care of me during my convalescence. I think I should go to my sister's house and let Satan take care of me. And he looked me in the eye. He said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I think this is what God wants." And he said, "Okay." So then I got permission to go see my sister.
I'm going to touch on a few different articles and a chapter of the book, once again, about the story Stephen has told and the different kind of versions of how this all occurred. And briefly, I'm just going to touch on The Prisoner of Paradise, The New Religious Cults by James and Marcia Rudin again, and how that story was retold. One midnight in the spring of 1976, the family deserted Steve when he rammed his car into the back of the truck on a Baltimore Beltway after 72 continuous hours of fundraising. Following the accident, he was taken to a hospital for an operation where he faced the possible amputation of his legs. Steve fully expected the family to assist him in his recovery, but instead the Unification Church leaders contacted Steve's sister and parents and informed them of the accident. They rushed to take care of him. His legs were saved, and during the long period of recuperation, he was deprogrammed and left the church. Steve is bitter when he remembers how quickly the church deserted him after his automobile accident. Quote, I deeply believe the group was a loving family that cared about its members. As soon as I was seriously injured and could no longer collect funds or recruit, the family called my Satanic Grill family. The Moonies couldn't get rid of me fast enough. End quote. And in Prison or Paradise, they offer up what may be an explanation for why the church did this. The church's seemingly unfeeling behavior towards Steve is explained in one of its training manuals. The church follower is told precisely what to do when a friend is wounded or injured in the fight against Satan. If you leave the friend, he will die. If you help him, he won't die for now, but you will lose the battle. Not because you don't love your brother, but because you do love him. You must leave him and attack the enemy and subjugate the enemy, and afterwards come back, and maybe already he is dead. Then, with tears, we embrace the dead body of our friend. This is from Slate magazine, The Man Who Wants to Free Trump Supporters from, quote, mind control. And it is from June 1st of 2021. Then one early morning in April 1976, sleep-deprived Hassan fell asleep at the wheel of a fundraising van and collided with an 18-wheeler. He broke his leg and after 2 weeks in the hospital was allowed to recover at his sister Thea's house, a rare respite from the Unification Church's insular world. While Hassan's parents had argued with him about his newfound life, even sending him to the rabbi for guidance, Thea had never reprimanded Hassan for his choice, an approach that Hassan would later counsel his new clients to follow. This is from Boston Magazine, The Other Side of Enlightenment, and this is from February 1st of 2007. In 1976, after pulling 2 consecutive all-nighters in a fundraising frenzy, Hassan fell asleep while driving a Unification Church van and rear-ended a tractor-trailer. After the accident, the church granted Hassan rare permission to visit his sister. His parents, who hadn't seen their son in a year, pounced on the opportunity. His father arrived with deprogrammers who whisked Hassan off to an apartment where he spent the next 5 days listening to a distinctly different interpretation of Moon. This is from The Guardian, and this is from September of 2002. I was with the Moonies for 2.5 years. I worked 21 hours a day, 7 days a week, in prayer for between 1 and 3 hours. Then I would spend the rest of the day doing PR or lectures for the group, recruiting and fundraising. Everyone on my team was told they had to raise a minimum of $100 a day, otherwise they wouldn't be allowed to sleep. And as a good leader, if they couldn't sleep, then I couldn't either. When I crushed a van into the back of a tractor trailer, I had gone 3 days without sleep. They gave me tapes of Moon's speeches to listen to in the hospital while I was recovering from the crash, but you can only do that for so many hours in the day. Out of a controlled environment, I really miss my younger sister. I called her and told her I had been in an accident. She told the rest of my family. They hired former members to do an intervention with me. It was a very difficult experience because I was programmed to fear Satan and anyone who criticized Moon. I thought it was a test of my faith, and I was convinced I hadn't been brainwashed. Now, this is from that Boston Magazine interview as well, and sometimes you just don't know where to put a Stephen Hassan story, and since I already was quoting from that Boston Magazine article, I thought I would share this story too. And it starts here. Now 53, Hassan has also written 2 books that fall somewhere at the literary crossroads of memoir, self-help guide, and mind control theory primer. He has appeared on 60 Minutes and Nightline, Been interviewed by Oprah and Larry King and quoted in the Washington Post and the New York Times. He believes he has even received a nod in the film Holy Smoke, in which Harvey Keitel plays a rough-and-tumble American deprogrammer flown to Australia to pry a young woman, portrayed by Kate Winslet, from the grips of a guru. Hassan thinks that Keitel's cowboy boots, featured prominently in one of the close-ups, are an oblique reference to his own footwear of choice worn to support a weak ankle. Whatever the satirical similarities, Keitel's character is hardly an accurate portrayal of Hassan. In the movie, the intervention rapidly devolves into lots of sex and a knockdown drag-out fight. Hassan, however, is anything but a brawler. Though he dabbled in traditional 1970s-style deprogramming earlier in his career, he has come to favor what he describes as a gentler and more effective method. So, Holy Smokes it's a movie that's based on a book. And this makes me laugh because I don't know if Steven has really watched the movie, because there's sex in it, there's violence, like between the deprogrammer, who's Harvey Keitel, and then Kate Winslet plays the woman who's being deprogrammed. They have sex. Harvey Keitel punches her and knocks her out, as I recall. Like, it's not like something that I would want to say like I'm getting a nod at. But I did find, in all fairness to Steve, just to be fair, I found, and this wasn't me that found it, I should say, and I can't remember who it was that pointed me in the direction of this. This was probably 6 months ago. But this is from, it's a review that was on the Center for Studies of New Religions by Massimo Introvigo. I can't really read, like the typesetting and things in the background's kind of weird for the eyes. And it's called Deprogramming Kate Winslet, a review of Holy Smoke by Anna and Jane Campion. And I'm just going to go to the bottom of the review because that's where the important part is, where Steve Hassan's name pops up briefly. The novel is much more about wild passion and a complicated psychosexual interplay between a mature man and a younger girl than about new religious movements. Some trivial stereotypes about cults and brainwashing go, however, unchallenged, and the final bibliography is not reassuring. Apart from the obligatory lift-in, the Campions quote Steve Hassan, and then it goes on to discuss, the goods and the bads about the bibliography. And that is about as close as you're going to get to anything finding Steve Hassan being related to a character in Holy Smokes. I guess the Campions quoted him in their book in the bibliography, but as for him being the inspiration for Harvey Keitel and the boots being a wink and a nod to Stephen Hassan, I don't know. But I wanted to throw that little story in there.
I was on crutches, and thank God my sister.
I got permission for Satan, my sister, to take care of me. Okay.
Told my parents. They did hire ex-Moonies, and I was at my sister's house. I was on the living room couch, and the Moonies, and I was told by the Moonies to call in every 3 hours, and I didn't because I was visiting. So they were suspicious, and they kept saying, "Oh, he's getting new eyeglasses," because they had been smashed or were taking this or that. And finally, the Moonies are like, "We're coming," because they had known the address. And long story short was that I was so fanatical. I had been prepped against deprogrammers. I was sure it would be a test that I could pass. And of course, I was angry that Satan had invaded the situation, but it was a chance to prove my loyalty to Father and true parents, etc. And but the Moonies were coming, so
members of the Moonies.
Yeah.
Wow. So your parents went deep with this. They knew exactly what they were dealing with.
They put everything on the table because they knew they could have gone to jail too if it didn't work. One of the team was a woman I had recruited.
They could have gone to jail.
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's illegal to abduct an adult.
You
were
abducted?
In my case, they just took my crutches away. I had a cast from my toes to my groin.
That's not abduction.
Correct. But at the point that I said I want to leave and they wouldn't let me leave, that could have been something about false imprisonment. But the long and the short of it is I was so confident that what I was doing was correct and that I wasn't brainwashed. And at a critical juncture where they were moving locations because the cult was coming after me to rescue me. And I had been asking for my mother because my plan was to guilt trip my mom into releasing me because my mom would do whatever I told her, like historically. Mom, please, I don't want to have to sue you and Dad. Whatever, that was my plan. So my father said, okay, let's go see Mom. And I agreed to get into the back seat of a car. My leg was outstretched and my dad was in the front. And two of the ex-members, one of whom was someone I had recruited into the cult who had left, Gladys, who was part of my team. I always liked Gladys. Anyway, so we're driving on the Long Island Expressway and we pass the exit to my house, my parents' house. And my first thought was, we're not going home. I need to kill my father. And I started thinking about how I could reach over and snap his neck while he's driving on the expressway. And I actually thought about it several minutes, and then I thought, he's going to die, I'm going to die, the other people are going to die, and I still have so much more I can do on earth to help God, and they would never get me to betray Father. It's ridiculous. So I decided not to kill my father in a moving car on the expressway, and we get to another location. And I'm in the back seat. My father's pulled over, and this football-sized man starts walking over to the car. 250, 300 pounds, 6'5", or whatever. And I said to my father was in the front seat of the car. He was turned around, and I said, I'm not getting out of the car, and if you make me, I will kill everybody. Or you will have to kill me, and the blood will be on your conscience forever. I'm looking at my father. I'm saying these words, and my father starts to cry like a tear.
This has always touched me, this part of his story.
This is the famous words he said. How would you feel if it was your son, your only son, who meets a group of people, controversial group of people, drops out of college and disappears from your life? How would you feel? The tear got me, and I'm tearing up just remembering that moment because my authentic self was like,
this breaks my heart, this
really
part of the story. It always does choke me up. This is where I say there's authentic parts of Steve's story.
I was thinking, so communists have brainwashed him to persecute Father. I can step into his shoes and imagine why he's doing this. I could imagine doing the same if it was my son. So I said, I think I'd be doing what you're doing now. So what do you want from me? And he said, I just want you to sit and listen with an open mind to information. And if you want to go back in a few days, I'll drive you there myself. But at least your mother and I will be able to sleep at night knowing we did the responsible thing. I still get teary when I think about it. So again, for me, it was a challenge
this part, I
of
do
my
think is so authentic.
confidence that I wasn't in a cult and I wasn't brainwashed and I was
can
doing
talk about. He
God's
doesn't need to
will.
add the
I
other
knew the
stuff.
truth. So I agreed. And so there was another 3 days that he asked me not to run away, not to try to contact the cult, but to listen and cooperate with the ex-members. And honestly, what was happening in the deprogramming, there were 4 deprogrammers. One was not an ex-Moonie. One was like a fanatical Christian who was very dogmatic. But the one that wasn't in the Moonies, all he did, his name was Gary Rosenberg, may he rest in peace. He would say, "So Steve, what do you think?" And in retrospect, again, after the fact, I would be telling him how to get me out, but it was not conscious.
How would you respond?
So, so Nestor and Mike, would be talking about this or that, and and then Gary would say, "So what do you think?" Like, Nestor's never going to get me with the Bible. I'm not a Christian. Like, that's not going to work. And this, I was like, the real me was like, here's the path to get me out. And Gladys, and this is another thing, Moonies and other cult members are really heavily phobetized about deprogrammers, that they were vicious, mean, satanic, like sex, drug, and rock and rollers. And I was a leader, and I was trained how to discriminate and evaluate people.
All right, Eileen.
And I knew these were sincere, good-hearted people. I didn't agree with them at the beginning because I was blocking every negative story they would share. But over time, as they were telling me stories, I started remembering better stories of more abuse or a better lie or whatever. I'll never forget Gladys, who I recruited.
From when you were in?
Yeah. But this was an unconscious process, right? But Gladys was like, "Do you remember lying to me when you recruited me?" And I was like, "Oh, I never lied to you." And then she recounted the story that I said to her, which I had no memory of. And I truly, at that moment, if you put me on a stack of Bibles, I would have said, I never lied in the Moonies, ever, because I was so in that mindset. But the critical thing that opened me up was seeing the ex-members. No one was abusing me. Everyone was very sure that the Moonies were a bad thing and that it was a cult, etc. I was doing thought stopping. My phobias were very strongly intact. One of the ex-members was one of my spiritual children, a woman named Gladys that I had recruited, who kept reminding me of how I had deceived her, how I had tricked her into the group, different experiences that were unethical that she had experienced, and lots of. And one of the big issues for me that helped me to wake up and leave was the whole issue around truth, which the organization claimed to have the highest truth, that the divine principle was the completed testament, and the whole notion that God is eternal and unchanging, and that truth is eternal and unchanging. And yet my experience in the group was that truth changed. It changed from year to year. It changed from country to country. And in fact, I was asked to lie to the members regarding any number of different issues. For example, how many times Moon was married, from he only had one wife to 2 wives to 3 wives. And it didn't dawn on me until the point where I was questioning it and wanting to leave, that if I was being told by him to lie to members, how do I know he's not lying to me? And in fact, I knew he was lying to me, and lying to the public. But when I finally had my intervention, I was basically shown a book called Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism by Robert Lifton. And it was all about the Chinese communist thought reform programs of Mao Zedong, and which was a totally atheistic political system. It was not a religious cult, it was a political cult. But in fact, the claims of having millions, if not hundreds of millions of members,
and having billions and millions and trillions of dollars and having political ties, then we should be following the Chinese government and its leadership. But the claim of big and money and politics is not a criteria of someone being a legitimate leader.
But then I learned about Lifton and Chinese communist brainwashing, because they said, you want to know of Chinese communist brainwashing?
I don't need new tires, but stay tuned for the next episode.
We're going to have to be smart. We're going to have to be strategic. We're going to have to be aggressive.
I'm an alpha guy.
I'll flip a table every time you aren't getting by.
Let's go. Just push.
It's all psychological warfare.
I'm not part of QAnon.
We know what they are doing.
For Trump.
If shit goes wrong, like, I will literally have to leave the country.
Stop that.
I'll land my initial plane.
Okay, high five. This isn't the hi-fi show.
Good night. Nighty night.